5 years. That's how long it's been since someone in my family remembered to save me a seat at Christmas dinner. So this year I did something wild. I bought myself a cabin up in the snowy mountains where nobody could find me. But guess what happened next? My whole family showed up at my door with suitcases, acting like they owned the place. They even had a key I never gave them. But I wasn't alone like they thought. I had help waiting inside. A police officer, security cameras watching everything, and my lawyer friend ready to protect me. This is the story of how I finally stood up for myself after being treated like I didn't matter. And trust me, you won't believe what happened when they tried to walk right into my new home without asking. It all started when my youngest grandson called me on video chat. His name is Tommy, and he's only 7 years old. His little face popped up on my tablet screen, and he looked so happy to see me. "Grandma," he shouted with a big smile. "Why aren't you coming to our house for Christmas this year?" My heart dropped into my stomach. Felt cold all over. "What do you mean, sweetie?" I asked him, trying to sound normal even though I felt sick inside. "Daddy said you're too busy to come. He said you have other plans." "Do you? Where are you going?" Behind Tommy I could see their living room. Christmas lights were already hanging everywhere. Shiny decorations covered every wall. And it was only the first day of December. They were getting ready for a big party, and nobody had told me about it. "Nobody told me about any Christmas plans yet, Tommy," I said quietly. His face looked confused. "But everyone's coming to our house, Grandma. Mommy has a big folder on her computer with everyone's names in it. Says Christmas 2023 on the front. I saw it yesterday." My hands started shaking. "Is my name in that folder, Tommy?" Before he could answer, someone grabbed the tablet away from him. It was his mom, Jennifer. Her face appeared on the screen, and she looked angry. "Tommy, you know you're not supposed to use the tablet without permission," she said in a sharp voice. Then she saw me watching. "Oh, Margaret, sorry about that. He's been breaking rules all week." I took a deep breath. "Jennifer, Tommy just told me you're having Christmas at your house. He said everyone's coming." Her smile looked fake and tight. "Oh, we're still thinking about it. Nothing is decided yet." I looked right at her. "I see. Well, when you do decide, please tell me. I'd really like to see the grandkids." "Of course," she said quickly. "I have to go now. Tommy needs to do his reading homework." "Say goodbye to Grandma, Tommy." I heard his small voice say, "Bye, Grandma," and then the screen went black. I sat there in my quiet house, staring at the empty screen for a long time. This was the 5th Christmas in a row. 5 whole years since my husband Robert passed away. 5 years of them making up reasons why I couldn't come. "We're keeping the party small this year, Mom. The kids have colds and we don't want you to get sick." "Didn't anyone tell you? We changed our plans at the last second." I looked around the house where Robert and I lived together for 35 years. We raised our 3 kids here. We had so many happy times. But now the house felt empty and sad, like a museum full of old memories. Something inside me broke right then. Something that had been bending and bending for 5 lonely years finally snapped in half. I opened my computer and looked at my bank account. The number there still surprised me sometimes. Robert had been really smart with money. He saved and invested our whole marriage. Then my parents left me some money too, and Robert helped it grow even bigger. My kids had no idea how much money I had. Robert and I chose to live simply. We didn't buy fancy things or show off. We spent money on experiences instead. My kids thought I only had my small teacher's retirement check. They thought I needed their help with money. But they still forgot about me every Christmas. That made it hurt even more. They didn't ignore me because they thought I was poor. They ignored me even though they thought I needed help. I moved my mouse over to a house hunting website. I'd been looking at mountain cabins for months, just dreaming about what it would be like to have my own special place. But suddenly, it wasn't just a dream anymore. 3 hours later, I made an appointment to see a house I'd been looking at online for weeks. It was a beautiful log cabin high up in the mountains with huge windows looking out at the trees. It sat on 6 acres of forest, completely private. The price was $900,000. A number that would shock my children if they knew. The real estate lady, Susan, seemed doubtful when I showed up by myself the next day. "This property costs quite a bit of money," she said carefully, looking at my regular clothes and comfortable shoes. "Most people who buy houses like this come with their whole family." "I'm not most people," I told her simply. As we walked through the cabin, something felt right in my chest. The huge windows showed mountains covered in trees. The big stone fireplace. The lovely kitchen where I could cook fancy meals I'd always wanted to try. This felt like home. "There's already a security system installed," Susan mentioned as we looked at the main bedroom. "The people who lived here before really cared about safety. They have cameras, alarms, everything. You just need to turn the monitoring service back on." I nodded, already imagining myself living here, safe and independent. "I'll buy it," I said. Susan's eyes went wide. "Don't you want to think about it first? Maybe talk to your family?" "I've been thinking about it for months," I said truthfully. "And my family doesn't get to decide about my money." 2 weeks later, I signed all the papers and got the keys to my new cabin. Everything moved fast because I could pay cash for the whole thing. As I drove up the curvy mountain road to my new home, snow started falling. Tiny white flakes landed on the pine trees along the driveway. Inside, I walked from room to room, touching the counters and windowsills that belonged only to me. No old memories here. No ghosts from the past. No disappointments. I turned on the security system right away. I set up the app on my phone so I could watch the cameras from anywhere. Then I called my old friend Harold. "Harold, it's Margaret. I just did something either very brave or very crazy. I need some help from a lawyer." Harold Patterson had been Robert's best friend since they were young. After Robert died, Harold became my good friend too. When I told him what I'd done, he sounded surprised at first. Then he sounded really happy. "It's about time you did something just for yourself, Margaret," he said warmly. "I'll drive up this weekend to help you get settled. We'll make sure all your papers are correct." When I hung up, I stood at the big windows, watching snow cover the mountains. For the first time in 5 years, I actually felt excited about Christmas. Christmas that would be completely mine. The first week in my mountain cabin went by so fast. Trucks delivered furniture every day. I had to make so many decisions. Each choice felt like I was saying, "This is who I am now. This is what I like." I didn't buy furniture that Robert would have liked. I didn't keep the kids' old bedrooms ready for visits that never happened anyway. Every single thing I bought, from the soft couch to the comfortable bed, was chosen just for me. "You're making a nest," Harold said when he arrived on Friday night. He brought an overnight bag and a bottle of expensive bubbly wine. Snow was in his hair and on his coat. His friendly face had a big smile. "Is that what this is?" I laughed. "I thought I was having an old lady crisis." "A crisis is when you make bad choices," he said. "This," he waved his hand around the beautiful living room with a mountain view, "is maybe the smartest thing you've done in years." After I showed Harold to the guest room, I gave him a full tour. We ended in my office where I'd set up the security camera screens. Multiple screens showed video from cameras around the property and at every door. "Quite the command center," Harold said, raising his eyebrows. "Are you planning for a war?" "Just being careful," I said. "I'm a woman living alone in a pretty remote place." I didn't mention the nagging worry that my kids might not respect my space once they found out about this cabin. Something in my gut told me to keep that worry to myself. Over dinner, a seafood stew I'd always wanted to cook but never did because my son claimed he hated fish. Harold helped me work through all the practical stuff. We talked about updating my will, changing my official address, and telling banks and doctors about my new place. "What about the old house?" he asked, pouring more wine into our glasses. "I'm thinking about selling it," I admitted. "There's nothing keeping me there anymore." Harold's face looked concerned. "Have you told your kids about any of this?" "Not yet," I said, looking down at my glass instead of at him. "They haven't called, not even to talk about Christmas plans that apparently don't include me." Harold's expression turned dark. He'd watched me get lonelier and lonelier over the past 5 years. He saw how my kids' visits got shorter and less frequent. How they forgot to invite me to family events while also making comments about my simple lifestyle and suggesting I should move into an old folks' home. "They act like their father in all the wrong ways," he said quietly. Robert had been smart and ambitious, but also controlling and worried about what people thought. I'd balanced those parts of him during our marriage, but without me around, our kids had become even more like that. "I keep wondering what I did wrong," I said softly. The wine was making me more honest. Was I too easy on them? Too strict? Did I not teach them to care about other people's feelings? "You didn't do anything wrong, Margaret. Some people just make selfish choices even when they're raised better." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "The question now is, what kind of relationship do you want with them going forward?" I thought about this as we moved to the couch with our wine. The fireplace made the room warm and cozy. Snow fell gently outside the windows. "I want a relationship built on real respect," I said finally. "Not duty, not pity, and definitely not convenience when it suits them." Harold nodded thoughtfully. "Then maybe this," he gestured around the room, "is the perfect chance to reset those expectations." The next morning brought more snow and an unexpected visitor. I was putting books on shelves when the security system beeped. Told me someone was at the front door. On the screen, I saw a man around 40 years old wearing a heavy coat and a police department hat. He carried a basket and was looking right at the doorbell camera. "Good morning," he said through the speaker system. "I'm Officer Ben Taylor, your neighbor from down the road. Thought I'd welcome you to the mountain." I hesitated for just a second, then used the intercom. "That's very kind. I'll be right there." Officer Ben Taylor stood a lot taller than me with wide shoulders and a face that showed he spent a lot of time outdoors. Even though he looked big and strong, his smile was gentle as he handed me the basket. "Homemade bread, honey from local bees, and a good bottle of whiskey," he explained. "Mountain essentials." "That's so thoughtful," I said. "Would you like to come in for coffee? I just made a fresh pot." Over steaming mugs at my kitchen counter, I learned that Ben was a police officer on medical leave. He was recovering from hurting his knee while chasing a bad guy. He lived year-round in a small house about half a mile down the mountain road. "Not many people live up here all year," he noted, looking around my cabin with appreciation. "Most of these places belong to city people who only come on weekends and never say hello." "I'm planning to live here permanently," I explained. The words felt good to say out loud. "I just retired from teaching." "On your own?" he asked, then quickly added, "Sorry, that's not my business." "It's fine," I said. "Yes, I'm on my own. My husband died 5 years ago, and my kids have their own lives." The simple version of a complicated truth. Ben nodded like he understood what I wasn't saying. "Well, mountain neighbors help each other out. I'm just down the road if you ever need anything." He wrote his number on a notepad on my counter. "Cell phone service can be bad during storms, but I have a regular phone line that always works. And I'm usually home these days while my knee heals." After he left, I stood at the window, watching him walk back through the snow to the road. There was something nice about knowing someone was nearby. Someone who chose this quiet life too, but was still friendly. That evening, as Harold got ready to go back to the city, he noticed Ben's number on the counter. "Making friends already?" he asked with a smile. "Just getting to know the neighbors," I replied. Ben says there aren't many people who live here all year. Ben, is it? Harold's eyebrows went up teasingly. Should I be jealous that you've replaced me so quickly? I laughed and gently pushed his arm. Don't be silly. He's young enough to be my son. And much more attentive than your actual son, Harold pointed out. As we hugged goodbye at the door, he held me a little longer than usual. I'm proud of you, Margaret. This is your second chapter. Make it everything you want it to be. Watching his car lights disappear down the snowy road, I felt strangely light inside. For the first time in decades, my life was completely mine to shape however I wanted. 2 weeks passed in peaceful quiet. I created routines that made nobody happy but me. Morning stretches facing the mountains. Afternoons reading by the fire. Evenings trying out fancy recipes I'd always wanted to make. I talked to Harold every few days and waved at Ben when we saw each other on the road. I'd almost forgotten about Christmas until my phone rang on December 18th. My oldest son Brian's name showed up on the screen. The first call from any of my kids since I moved to the mountains. Mom, he said when I answered. His voice had that familiar sound of forced patience. Where have you been? I've tried calling the house twice this week. Hello, Brian. I've been at home. No, you haven't. I drove by yesterday and the house was dark. Your car wasn't in the driveway. So he'd been checking up on me. Not because he cared, I suspected, but to make sure I'd be alone for Christmas again. That would make excluding me easier on his conscience. I've moved, I said simply. A moment of silence. Moved. Moved where? You didn't say anything about moving. I wasn't aware I needed permission, I said. The words came out sharper than I meant them to. Years of hurt suddenly finding their voice. Of course you don't need permission, he said quickly. It's just... This is so sudden. Where are you living now? Some retirement community. The assumption stung. No, Brian. I bought a cabin in the mountains. You what? His shock would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. Mom, that's... How could you possibly afford? The maintenance on mountain properties, the isolation. He seemed to be thinking out loud, trying to understand. Your father and I were always smart with money, I replied, purposely keeping it vague. But your retirement check, the costs of a mountain place. He was processing, rethinking everything he thought he knew about my situation. I'm perfectly fine financially, thank you, I said. Now, was there something specific you were calling about? Another pause. Actually, yes. We've been trying to plan Christmas. Lisa and Ryan are bringing their kids to our house on Christmas Eve. Then we're all thinking about taking a little vacation somewhere with snow for the children. The perfect opportunity to invite me. But he still didn't. 5 years of leaving me out had become automatic. That sounds lovely, I said. I hope you all have fun. Right, well. He cleared his throat. You'll be okay on your own for the holidays. I'm planning my own Christmas this year, I said truthfully. Something special. After we hung up, I sat watching snowflakes dance outside the windows. Uneasiness crept over me. The conversation felt like spying. Brian checking to make sure I had no expectations before finalizing their plans. My suspicions were confirmed 2 days later when the security system alerted me to a vehicle coming up the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I recognized Brian's expensive SUV moving slowly, like the driver wasn't sure of the address. The car stopped. Brian got out, looking up at the cabin with disbelief on his face. He took several pictures with his phone, then got back in his car and drove away. He didn't even knock. I called Harold immediately. He didn't even knock, I explained, watching Brian's car disappear on the security screen. Just took pictures and left. That's worrying, Harold said in his lawyer voice. How did he even find your address? The property records wouldn't be updated this fast, would they? I don't think so, I said. Could he have followed you? Or maybe the real estate lady said something. We ended the call with Harold promising to check if the property sale had been recorded publicly yet. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, but that night I double-checked every door and window before bed. The next morning brought a flood of texts from all three of my kids. More communication than I'd received from them in months. From Brian: "Mom, we need to talk about this cabin situation. Call me right away." From Lisa: "Since when do you have money for a vacation home? We need to discuss this as a family." From Ryan: "Are you sure this is smart at your age? Living alone in the mountains seems dangerous." I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I drove into town for groceries and Christmas shopping. I decided to host a small dinner on Christmas Eve. Just me, Harold, and Ben, who mentioned he had no family nearby. When I got home that afternoon with bags full of food and packages, something felt wrong. The security system showed no alerts, but a small difference in how my entry bench looked caught my eye. I set down my bags and checked the security app on my phone, watching footage from the past few hours. At 2:27 in the afternoon, a car I recognized as Lisa's pulled into my driveway. The outside camera caught her and Ryan walking up to my front door, looking around nervously. Lisa reached into her purse and pulled out what looked like a key. My heart started racing as I watched them unlock my door and walk right into my cabin. The inside cameras showed them walking through every room, opening closets, looking at furniture, peering at price tags I hadn't removed yet. The microphones picked up everything they said. "This place must have cost at least $800,000, Lisa said, running her hand along my kitchen counter. "Where in the world did she get that kind of money?" "Dad must have had savings we didn't know about," Ryan replied, opening my refrigerator and taking a bottle of water without asking. "She definitely couldn't buy this on a teacher's retirement. Did you see the view? This location is worth a fortune. Think about the family parties we could throw here. Way better than her old house. Brian's already planning. We're all coming here for Christmas. Surprise her," he says. Lisa laughed like somehow this was still my decision to make. My hands shook as I fast-forwarded through their 45-minute invasion of my privacy. Before leaving, Lisa placed something on my kitchen counter. "Spare key." She pointed to it while saying something to Ryan about making sure everyone could get in. "Check the front door." It was locked, meaning they'd locked it again when they left. If I hadn't watched the security video, I might never have known they'd been inside my home. Fighting panic, I called Harold and then Ben. Within 30 minutes, both men arrived. Ben was still in his police uniform from working earlier. "They had a key," I said, my voice steadier than I felt as I showed them the video. "Lisa used a key to get into my cabin without permission. The only way they could have a key is if someone from the real estate deal gave it to them," Harold said grimly. "Which would be really wrong, possibly illegal." Ben studied the security footage with professional focus. "This is clear trespassing," he confirmed. "Having a key doesn't mean they're allowed to enter someone's home without permission." I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the counter. "They're planning to come here for Christmas. All of them. Brian said they're going to surprise me. Do you want to change the locks?" Ben asked practically. I want them to understand they can't just invade my life whenever they feel like it, I replied. A lifetime of being agreeable suddenly gave way to righteous anger. I want them to face consequences for once. Harold and Ben looked at each other. What did you have in mind? Harold asked carefully. I want to be ready when they arrive, I said, my determination growing stronger. Not caught off guard. Not emotional. Not weak. I want to face them from a position of strength. Ben nodded with approval. The surprise should be yours, not theirs. Exactly, I said, pacing my kitchen, ideas forming quickly. They think they're surprising me, but we'll be waiting. The question is, what exactly do I want to happen when they show up? Harold leaned against the counter, his lawyer brain already working. We should think about the practical stuff first. When do you think they'll come? Christmas Eve seems most likely, I reasoned, based on what Lisa said about Brian's plans. That gives us 3 days to get ready, Ben said, his training showing. First thing is securing the property. I recommend changing the locks right away. I agree, Harold added. We should also find out how they got a key in the first place. The next morning I called Susan, my real estate agent, and explained what happened as nicely as possible. Mrs. Patterson, I'm absolutely horrified, she responded, real distress in her voice. I can promise you no one from our office would give keys to anyone without your clear permission. Yet somehow my daughter has a key to my cabin, I replied, keeping my tone measured. A cabin whose address I haven't shared with any of my kids. After promising to look into it immediately, Susan called back within an hour. I found out what happened, she said, her voice tight with professional embarrassment. Your son Brian contacted our office last week. He claimed to be helping you move. He said you were having trouble walking and had asked him to coordinate some deliveries. The calculated lie made my stomach turn. And someone believed this without checking with me? One of our new office workers, yes. She gave him a key, thinking she was being helpful. I've already started disciplinary action. This is a serious breach of rules. By that afternoon, a locksmith had changed every lock on the cabin. Ben helped me upgrade the security system to include alerts for anyone trying to use old keys. Harold, meanwhile, had written up a formal trespass notice that could be presented if needed. Are you sure you want to be this firm? Harold asked as we looked over the document. Once certain legal lines are drawn, it might be hard to go back to a more relaxed family relationship. I thought carefully about his words, looking out at the mountains that had become my safe place. I'm not doing this to punish them, Harold. I'm doing it to set clear boundaries. For too long, they've treated me like an accessory to their lives. Someone to include or exclude based on convenience. That ends now. Ben came over that evening with takeout food from the local Chinese restaurant. He joined Harold and me for a planning session. As a police officer, his perspective was valuable. Based on the security video, they clearly entered without permission, he confirmed. That's criminal trespass in this state. However, they could say they thought they had permission since Brian got the key through what seemed like legitimate means. So what are our options? I asked, picking at my noodles. Several approaches, Ben said thoughtfully. The most confrontational would be to file an official report, which could result in criminal charges. Less severe would be to simply prevent them from entering when they arrive and tell them they're not welcome without an invitation. Harold raised a third option. Or you could let them in on your terms. Allow them to arrive thinking they're surprising you, only to find you fully prepared and in control. A psychological approach rather than a legal one. Ben nodded. Potentially very effective. The idea resonated with me. After years of being dismissed and pushed aside, there was something appealing about completely turning the tables. I like that option, I decided. Let them come thinking I'll be pathetically grateful for their presence, only to discover I've built a life that doesn't depend on their attention. We spent the next hour planning exactly what would happen on Christmas Eve. Harold would arrive early, providing legal support if needed. Ben would be there in his official uniform, a clear symbol of authority. and I would be ready to take back control completely. There's one more thing, I said as our planning wrapped up. I need to know exactly what they're expecting. Which means I need to contact the one person who won't lie to me. The next morning, I called Tommy under the pretense of asking what he wanted for Christmas. "We're coming to see you," he blurted excitedly before I could even bring it up. "Dad says we're all going to your new cabin for Christmas. It's supposed to be a surprise, but I already know." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice light. "Did Dad say when you're coming?" "Christmas Eve. We're bringing all our presents and staying for 3 whole days. Mom says your cabin has lots of bedrooms for everyone." "Did she?" said. "How thoughtful of her to make plans for my cabin." "Dad says it's the perfect place for our family Christmas tradition," Tommy continued innocently. "He's bringing the special adult drinks. Aunt Lisa is planning where to put the Christmas tree. Uncle Ryan says there's probably a hot tub." Each word revealed more of their presumption. They weren't just visiting. They were taking over my cabin entirely, planning to force their traditions into my space without a single thought about what I might want. After ending the call with Tommy, I sat in shocked silence for several minutes. The completeness of their sense of entitlement was breathtaking. They hadn't just left me out of their Christmas plans for 5 years. Now they intended to commandeer my private retreat for their own convenience. That evening, when Ben stopped by to install extra security cameras, I shared what I'd learned. "They're planning to stay for 3 days," I explained, unable to keep the disbelief from my voice. "They've already decided where to put their tree, which rooms they'll use, everything. Not a single one of them has actually asked if they're welcome here." Ben's expression darkened. "This goes way beyond rude. They're treating your home like it's community property." "Exactly." I handed him a cup of tea. Our evening routine developing naturally over recent days. Which means our Christmas Eve reception needs to be crystal clear. This is my home, my life, my choice who enters and who doesn't. "Are you prepared for what might happen?" he asked gently. "Family fights around holidays can leave permanent damage." I looked out at the snow-covered mountains, their steady presence reminding me of my own newfound strength. "The damage has already been done, Ben. For 5 years, they've shown me exactly where I stand in their lives. All I'm doing now is showing them where they stand in mine." Christmas Eve morning arrived clear and cold, sunlight sparkling across fresh snow like scattered jewels. I woke early, a mixture of determination and nervous energy pushing me through my morning routine. Today, everything would change. Either the start of honest relationships with my kids, or the final acknowledgement that those relationships had been broken beyond repair by years of neglect. I'd spent the previous day transforming the cabin into exactly the Christmas setting I wanted. No compromises for my children's preferences. No accommodations for grandchildren I rarely saw. Instead, I decorated with simple elegance. White lights woven through fresh pine branches on the mantel. A small tasteful tree decorated with the antique ornaments my grandmother had left me. Sophisticated table settings for 3. Me, Harold, and Ben. The guest rooms stayed noticeably untouched. No fresh towels. No beds turned down. No special preparations for uninvited guests. Every detail of the cabin made one statement. This is my home, arranged for my pleasure, not a hotel waiting for your arrival. At 9 o'clock, Harold called to confirm his plans. I'll be there around 2, he said. That gives us plenty of time to review everything before your children's expected arrival. Perfect. Ben's coming at 1 to help with final security checks. How are you feeling, Margaret? Harold's voice softened with concern. I considered the question, looking out at the pristine landscape. Remarkably calm, actually. For the first time in years, I feel completely in control of my own life. After the call ended, I checked my appearance in the mirror. Chosen my outfit carefully. Not the comfortable but unflattering clothes my kids were used to seeing me in, but a well-fitted navy dress that looked elegant. I paired it with the sapphire necklace Robert had given me for our 25th anniversary. My gray hair was freshly styled in a modern cut that framed my face nicely. I'd taken extra care with makeup, highlighting my eyes. The woman looking back at me didn't look like anybody's fading grandmother. She looked confident, put together, and very much in command. Ben arrived right at 1, dressed in his full police uniform rather than the casual clothes I'd become used to seeing. The official appearance was intentional. We'd agreed his presence should communicate authority rather than just friendship. "The roads are clear," he reported, stomping snow from his boots in the entry. "No weather problems that might delay their arrival." "Good. Everything needs to go according to our plan, not theirs." We spent the next hour going over the security system and finalizing our strategy. Ben had positioned additional cameras to capture the driveway and every entrance. All feeds displayed on multiple devices. The monitoring station in my office, Ben's tablet, and my phone, ensuring we'd have complete awareness of my family's arrival and movements. "Remember," Ben said as we finished, "you're in control here. This is your cabin, your rules, your boundaries. Don't let them twist things around." "I won't," I promised, grateful for his steady presence. When Harold arrived at 2 o'clock, bringing a bottle of expensive champagne for celebrating afterward, the three of us did a final walkthrough. Every detail was perfect. From the elegant holiday decorations to the wonderful smell of the roast cooking slowly in the oven. A sophisticated Christmas Eve dinner for 3. "The table settings are a particularly nice touch," Harold observed, nodding at the dining room with its 3 carefully arranged place settings. "The physical proof that you weren't expecting them speaks volumes." "That's exactly the point," I agreed. "I've moved on. Created my own traditions. They need to understand I'm no longer sitting by the phone waiting for their attention." At 3:45, Ben's tablet chimed with an alert. "Vehicle approaching," he announced, showing us the feed from the driveway camera. Brian's SUV led the line, followed by Lisa's minivan and Ryan's sedan. I counted heads as they parked. All 3 of my children, their spouses, and 6 grandchildren ranging from Tommy's 7 years to Lisa's daughter Emma's 16. 11 people showing up unannounced, expecting rooms in a cabin prepared for 3. "Are you ready?" Harold asked quietly, standing beside me at the window as we watched them unload suitcases and wrapped gifts. "Completely," I assured him, though my heart had started racing. Ben positioned himself where he could be seen from the entry but not immediately confrontational. We watched on the monitor as Lisa walked up to the front door, key in hand. Her first attempt to insert it failed. So did her second. Confusion crossed her face as she realized the locks had been changed. After a quick discussion with Brian, she pressed the doorbell instead. The chime echoed through the cabin as I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and moved to answer with slow, unhurried steps. "Surprise!" Multiple voices shouted as I opened the door. Their faces showed exaggerated excitement that flickered slightly when they saw my appearance. Elegant, composed, and clearly not surprised at all. "Hello," I said pleasantly, making no move to step aside and let them in. "This is unexpected." Brian recovered first, his salesman's smile sliding back into place. "Merry Christmas, Mom. We thought we'd surprise you with a family holiday at your new place." He gestured broadly at the group gathered behind him. "Everyone's here." "So I see," I replied, still blocking the doorway. "How thoughtful of you to decide how I should spend Christmas in my own cabin." An uncomfortable silence fell as my less than enthusiastic response registered. Jennifer, Brian's wife, shifted awkwardly beside him. The younger grandchildren looked confused by the tension. Lisa's husband checked his watch impatiently. "Mom," Lisa said with a nervous laugh, "it's freezing out here. Can we come in?" "That depends," I said calmly. "Did any of you think to call and ask if I was available to host 11 people for Christmas?" or whether I had my own plans. Ryan stepped forward, using the coaxing tone he employed when he thought I was being difficult. Come on, Mom. We wanted to surprise you. You're always saying you want to see more of the grandkids. A surprise visit is stopping by for coffee, Ryan. Not showing up with luggage for a 3-day. The stunned silence that followed was broken by Tommy's innocent voice. Daddy, you said Grandma would be happy to see us. The genuine confusion in his voice nearly broke my resolve, but I reminded myself this wasn't about punishing my grandchildren. It was about establishing boundaries their parents had trampled for years. I am always happy to see you, Tommy, I said gently. But right now I need to talk to your parents about some grown-up things. Why don't you all come inside where it's warm and we'll sort this out? I stepped aside finally, allowing them to enter the foyer where they immediately noticed Ben standing in his police uniform, watching silently from near the kitchen. Brian froze mid-step. Mom, why is there a police officer in your cabin? This is Officer Ben Taylor, I said, closing the door behind my bewildered family. He's here because I have concerns about unauthorized entry into my home. Unauthorized entry. Lisa's voice rose in confusion. What are you talking about? Perhaps we should all— Brian, ever the pragmatist, assessed the situation with new clarity. So where does this leave us now? Are we supposed to just leave on Christmas Eve? Our feelings aren't the priority here, Lisa added quietly, wiping at her eyes. I looked around at my children, their spouses, my grandchildren who were innocent in this adult conflict. The carefully prepared dinner for 3 in my dining room. The plans I'd made for a quiet, dignified holiday on my own terms. That, I said finally, depends entirely on what happens next. For several long moments no one spoke. The crackling fire and distant sounds of the younger children in the kitchen were the only noises. I remained standing, watching my 3 adult children process the reality of their situation. Caught in their deception, confronted with evidence, and finally facing consequences for years of thoughtless behavior. Brian was the first to speak. Mom, clearly we've made some serious mistakes here, he began, his tone apologetic. We should have called first. Obviously the key situation was wrong. Wrong, I repeated. Breaking into my cabin and planning to take it over for your holiday is more than wrong, Brian. Lisa wiped at her eyes, her makeup beginning to smudge. We never thought of it as breaking in. In our minds, you'd be happy to have us all together. Without asking me. Without considering I might have made my own plans after 5 years of lonely holidays. Ryan, always the most defensive, shifted restlessly. You're making it sound like we deliberately left you out all these years. That's not fair. We've all been busy. Life gets complicated. Too busy for a phone call. I interrupted. Too complicated to extend a simple invitation. I never expected you to put me above your own families, Ryan. I just wanted to be considered part of those families. Emma stood suddenly. I want to know why we never visited Grandma for Christmas, she announced, looking directly at her mother. You always said she preferred quiet holidays. That she didn't like winter travel. Lisa flinched visibly. Emma, please. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time, I countered. Emma deserves honest answers. All the grandchildren do. I turned to my granddaughter, heart aching at how much she'd grown in the brief glimpses I'd been allowed. I never said I preferred quiet holidays, Emma. Quite the opposite. I've called every December for 5 years asking about plans. Jennifer cleared her throat. In all fairness, Margaret, you have to admit you don't exactly fit with our usual celebrations. The children have certain expectations. Traditions we've built. Traditions that deliberately left out their grandmother. I finished. How convenient to build traditions that justified excluding me. Ben shifted slightly from his position, a subtle reminder of his presence. Perhaps, he suggested professionally, this would be a good time to consider the agreement Mr. Patterson mentioned. Harold stepped forward with the document. This isn't legally binding in a traditional sense, he explained. Rather, it's a clear statement of boundaries and expectations going forward. A reset, if you will. Brian accepted the papers, reading through them with a frown. This feels extreme. Or family. We shouldn't need written agreements. Apparently we do, I replied evenly. Because verbal understandings and basic respect haven't been enough. As Brian read through the document, Tommy appeared in the doorway. His small face troubled. "Is Christmas cancelled?" he asked, looking around at the tense adult faces. The innocent question pierced through the confrontation, reminding me that my grandchildren were blameless in this situation. Whatever grievances I had with my children, the little ones deserved a happy holiday. "No, sweetheart," I answered gently. "We're just figuring out what kind of Christmas we're going to have." Jennifer moved to take Tommy back to the kitchen, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Let him stay. In fact, let's have all the children join us. They should understand what's happening." After the remaining grandchildren gathered, I addressed them directly. "I love all of you very much," I began, making eye contact with each small face. "And I've missed you terribly during all the holidays we haven't shared. Your parents and I are trying to figure out how we can be a better family going forward. One where everyone feels included and valued." 7-year-old Tommy frowned thoughtfully. "Like when you tell us to use our words instead of grabbing toys?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the adults. The simple childhood parallel cut straight to the heart of the issue. "Exactly like that," I agreed. Sometimes even grown-ups need reminders about sharing and considering others' feelings. Brian set down the agreement. His expression conflicted. "Mom, can we have a moment to discuss this privately? Just us siblings." I nodded, gesturing toward the office. "Take all the time you need." As my children filed out to talk, I turned my attention to my grandchildren, asking about school, hobbies, interests, making up for lost time in small ways. Ben discreetly stepped outside to give us privacy while Harold moved to the kitchen to make coffee. 15 minutes later, Brian, Lisa, and Ryan returned. Something in their bearing had shifted. A new seriousness replacing their earlier defensiveness. "We've talked," Brian said, serving as spokesman. "And we owe you an apology. A real one." He took a deep breath. "After Dad died, it was easier to build our holidays around our own needs than to think about how lonely you might be. We told ourselves you were fine, that you understood, that it just worked out this way each year." Lisa stepped forward, tears flowing freely now. "The truth is, I didn't want to face holidays without Dad. Being with you reminded me he was gone, and it was easier to just create distance. I never thought about how much worse that made it for you. And when we found out you had this beautiful cabin," Ryan added, "we were shocked, confused, and yes, selfish. Instead of being happy you'd found something new, we immediately thought about how it could benefit us." Brian picked up the agreement. "We'll sign this, Mom. Not because we need a legal document to behave decently, but as a symbol that we're committed to doing better. Being better. And we understand if you want us to leave," Lisa added quietly. "We showed up uninvited and presumptuous. Your feelings are what matter here." I looked at my children, really looked at them. Seeing past my hurt to the flawed, complicated adults they'd become. In their faces I could see traces of Robert, of myself, of the babies I'd once held. Imperfect people who had made selfish choices, yes, but still my family. "I don't want you to leave," I said finally. "But I do want you to understand something fundamental. This is my cabin, my life, built on my terms. You are welcome here when invited, when respectful, when genuinely interested in me as a person rather than what I can provide." I gestured toward the dining table with its elegant settings for 3. I had plans tonight. Dinner with Harold and Ben, who have shown me more consideration in recent weeks than my own children have in years. Those plans will proceed. Taking a deep breath, I continued. "However, there's an inn in town with excellent last-minute rooms. I suggest you all get settled there tonight. Then tomorrow, Christmas Day, you're welcome to return as invited guests. We'll have a proper holiday meal, exchange gifts, and begin rebuilding what's been broken." A mixture of relief and chastened understanding passed across their faces. They realized I was offering a path forward. Not unconditional forgiveness, but an opportunity to earn back their place in my life. That sounds more than fair, Brian said quietly. More than we deserve, honestly. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave for the inn, Emma approached me hesitantly. Grandma, would it be okay if I stayed here with you tonight? I'd like to help with Christmas preparations. Her request, so genuine, so untainted by the adult complications, touched me deeply. I'd like that very much, I replied, embracing her for the first time in far too long. After the convoy of vehicles departed for the inn, an extraordinary quiet settled over the cabin. Ben excused himself to change out of his uniform, promising to return for dinner as planned. Harold opened the champagne he'd brought, pouring 3 glasses, one for himself, one for me, and one for Emma, which I replaced with sparkling cider despite her protests that 16 was practically grown up in Europe. Well, Marcus said, raising his glass, that went rather differently than expected. Did it? I took a thoughtful sip. They reacted exactly as they always have, with surprise that I might have needs and boundaries of my own. But they signed the agreement, Emma pointed out, clearly still processing the afternoon's events. That's something, isn't it? It's a beginning, I acknowledged. Actions will matter more than signatures. As Ben returned in regular clothes and we settled in for our originally planned dinner, Emma watched us with curious eyes. The elegant table, the sophisticated menu, the easy conversation flowing between the 3 adults. This clearly wasn't the grandmother she thought she knew. You're different here, she observed as I served the roast. More. I don't know. Yourself. That's perceptive, I smiled at her. For a long time after your grandfather died, I defined myself by my relationships to others. Robert's widow. Your parents' mother. Your grandmother. This place represents the first decision I've made solely for myself in decades. Why didn't you tell anyone about buying it? Emma asked. I considered her question carefully. I needed space to rediscover who I am when I'm not playing roles for other people. Your parents have had very specific expectations of who Mom should be. Quiet, agreeable, grateful for whatever attention they choose to give. I needed to hear my own voice again. Ben nodded with understanding. Reinvention requires distance sometimes. Exactly, I agreed. I needed to figure out who Margaret is, separate from everyone else's expectations. Emma twisted her napkin thoughtfully. Mom always talks about you like you're fragile, like you can't handle change or complicated things. But you're not like that at all. That perception served their purposes, Harold observed. If Margaret was too fragile to handle family gatherings or too set in her ways to enjoy their modern celebrations, they could exclude her without guilt. That's harsh, Emma protested, though her expression suggested she recognized the truth. But accurate, I said gently. It's not pleasant to realize, I know. But part of growing up is recognizing that parents are flawed, complicated people, not the perfect authorities we imagine as children. Our dinner stretched into a long evening of honest conversation. Emma asked questions about her grandfather, about my life before marriage and children, about my teaching career. Subjects her parents had rarely explored. I found myself speaking more freely than I had in years, no longer measuring my words against potential judgment. When she finally yawned around 11 o'clock, I showed her to one of the guest rooms, the green room with its wonderful view of the moonlit mountains. This would have been Mom and Dad's room, wouldn't it? She asked, taking in the tasteful furnishings. If they'd stayed. Probably. Your mother has always liked green. I'm glad they're not here tonight, Emma confessed quietly. It's nice having you to myself for once. After she'd settled in, I rejoined Harold and Ben in the living room where they sat with nightcaps by the fire. She's a remarkable young woman, Harold observed. More insightful than her mother was at that age. She reminds me of you, Ben added with a warm smile. Clear-eyed about people's motivations. I was never that perceptive at 16, I laughed, accepting the small glass of brandy Harold offered. But I hope she maintains that clarity. It will serve her well. What about tomorrow? Ben asked, returning to practical matters. Are you ready for the full family invasion? I considered this, watching firelight dance across the ceiling. I think so. Today wasn't about punishing them. It was about establishing that I'm not a supporting character in their lives anymore. I have my own agency, boundaries, and expectations. They needed that wake-up call, Harold agreed. Though I suspect old habits will try to reassert themselves if you're not vigilant. Probably, I acknowledged. But I'm not the same person they could dismiss so easily anymore. This place, I gestured around the room that represented my independence, isn't just a cabin. It's a statement about who I am now and how I expect to be treated. After Harold and Ben departed with promises to check in tomorrow, I found myself alone in my mountain sanctuary, reflecting on the day's confrontation and surprising resolution. Everything had changed in ways I couldn't have predicted when I first discovered my children's planned invasion. I slept deeply that night, waking Christmas morning to find Emma already in the kitchen, attempting to make French toast using a recipe she'd found online. I wanted to surprise you with breakfast, she explained sheepishly, flour dusting her nose. But I think I misunderstood the instructions about the egg mixture. Together we salvaged breakfast, laughing at the mishaps as we ate at the kitchen island. Do you think today will be weird? She asked hesitantly. After yesterday? Probably, I admitted. Growth usually involves some discomfort. Are you still mad at them? Thought carefully. Not mad exactly. Disappointed certainly. But also hopeful that yesterday might have been the beginning of something better. By noon, my children began arriving from the inn. More tentatively this time. Knocking respectfully and waiting to be invited in. They brought their overnight bags but left them in their vehicles until explicitly welcomed. Small changes that signaled they'd absorbed at least some of yesterday's lessons. Brian presented me with a beautifully wrapped package. We got you something special, he explained. Before we knew about the cabin. It seems inadequate now, but we hope you'll like it. Inside was a handmade photo album, professionally assembled with pictures spanning decades. From my wedding to Robert through the births of grandchildren and various family milestones. Many photos I'd never seen before. We realized you might not have copies of many of these, Lisa explained. Especially the recent ones of the grandkids. The thoughtfulness of the gift, though late, touched me. Thank you. This means a great deal. As the day progressed, a curious transformation unfolded. Without their presumption of control, my children seemed unsure how to act in my cabin. They asked permission before using the kitchen, consulted me about activities, generally exhibited a carefulness that, while slightly awkward, represented a meaningful shift. Ryan, helping me prepare vegetables for Christmas dinner, broke the careful politeness with unexpected honesty. I didn't realize how beautiful it is here, he said quietly. I can see why you chose this place. It speaks to me, I agreed. The mountains have a permanence that's somehow comforting. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About being treated as an afterthought. He kept his eyes on the carrots he was chopping. You're right. We've been selfish. After Dad died, it was easier to create distance than to face holidays with his empty chair. I understand that, Ryan. I felt his absence more sharply than anyone. But pushing me away only made the loss deeper. He nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. I know that now. We should have come together instead of drifting apart. Similar moments of reflection occurred throughout the day. Not dramatic apologies or complete transformations, but small acknowledgments of wrongdoing. Tentative steps toward reconnection. By evening, as we gathered around the Christmas dinner I'd prepared, the atmosphere had evolved from strained politeness of mourning to something more authentically warm. Not perfect, not instantly healed, but moving in a direction that felt, for the first time in years, like family. Christmas dinner marked a subtle but important shift. Instead of the chaotic rush that characterized holiday meals at my children's homes, where conversations were fragmented, children constantly left for their devices, and meals were hurried through to get to gifts, we dined with intention. I'd set the table with my finest dishes. Not the practical everyday plates my children remembered from childhood, but elegant china with gold edging that Robert had given me for our 30th anniversary. Crystal glasses and real silver completed the setting, creating an atmosphere of occasion rather than casual convenience. "Mom, this is beautiful," Lisa said, genuinely surprised as she took her seat. "I don't think I've ever seen this china before." "Your father gave it to me years ago," I explained, arranging the last place setting. "But there never seemed to be an appropriate occasion to use it at the old house." "Why not?" Emma asked, carefully touching the delicate gold rim. I considered my answer. I suppose I'd convinced myself that beautiful things should be saved for someday rather than enjoyed now. That's changed recently. Brian raised his eyebrows. "Along with quite a few other things, it seems." "Yes," I agreed simply. "Life is too short for waiting, Brian. The past 5 years taught me that quite clearly." Before he could respond, I asked everyone to sit down. I made a point of placing the youngest grandchildren beside their parents rather than separated at a kids' table. When everyone was settled, I remained standing, lifting my glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, my voice steady as all eyes turned to me. "To new beginnings, honest connections, and the courage to rewrite stories that no longer serve us." There was a moment of collective consideration as my words settled in. Then glasses were raised in response. Jennifer, surprisingly, was the first to speak. "To family," she added softly, "in all its complicated, imperfect glory." As we enjoyed the meal I'd prepared, more sophisticated than the traditional turkey dinner they would have expected, conversation flowed with surprising ease. The children, included at the adult table, rose to the occasion with better manners than their parents had likely anticipated. Tommy, seated between Brian and Jennifer, turned to me with genuine curiosity. "Grandma, where did you learn to cook like this? It's fancy, like a restaurant." "I took cooking classes in the city last year," I explained. "French cooking. I've always enjoyed cooking, but I wanted to learn new things beyond the family meals you're familiar with." "You never mentioned cooking classes," Lisa said, a note of defensiveness creeping in. "You never asked," I replied mildly. "After your father died, I developed several new interests. The cooking classes, watercolor painting, even investment seminars to better understand managing my money." Ryan looked genuinely surprised. "I had no idea you were interested in investments." "There's quite a bit you don't know about me," I acknowledged without bitterness. "I've changed substantially in the past 5 years." "I'm starting to see that," he admitted. As dinner continued, I observed my family with fresh eyes. Without the weight of expectations, mine for inclusion, theirs for me to conform to their image, we were discovering each other anew. My children asked questions about my life they'd never bothered with before. The grandchildren, witnessing this more authentic interaction, joined in with their own curiosities. After dinner, we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. I'd prepared individual chocolate lava cakes, another skill from my cooking classes, which drew appreciative sounds. "This is different from our usual Christmas," Lisa observed, curling into an armchair with her cake. "More thoughtful somehow." Because it's Grandma's Christmas, not just a copy of everyone else's, Emma said wisely from her spot on the floor near the fire. Jennifer studied me over her coffee cup. I feel like we're meeting a different person than the mother-in-law I've known for 15 years. Not different, I corrected gently. Just more complete. For years I allowed myself to be defined by my roles in your lives. Mother, grandmother, widow. This past year I've reclaimed the other parts of who I am. As evening deepened, the younger children grew tired. Brian checked his watch, then looked at me uncertainly. We should probably head back to the inn soon. The little ones need their beds. I nodded, noting his careful phrasing. Not presuming they would stay overnight as originally planned. Of course. Though you're welcome to return tomorrow for breakfast if you'd like. Really? Lisa looked surprised. Yes, I said simply. Today has been healing in many ways. I'd like to continue the conversation. As they gathered their belongings, collecting scattered wrapping paper and the children's new toys, the mood was markedly different from their entitled arrival yesterday. Each thanked me individually with varying degrees of sincerity, but all acknowledging that the day had unfolded unexpectedly. Emma hung back as the others headed toward their cars, approaching me hesitantly. Could I? Would it be okay if I stayed again tonight? I'd like to help with breakfast tomorrow. Her request touched me deeply. I'd like that very much. If your parents approve. Lisa, overhearing, seemed about to object but stopped herself, visibly reconsidering. That would be fine, she said after a moment. If that's what you both want. After they'd all left, Emma helped me with dishes, moving around my kitchen with growing familiarity. You know what I realized today, she said, carefully drying a crystal wine glass. I've never really known you. Like the real you. What do you mean? At home, you're always just Grandma. The person who sends birthday cards and listens to Mom complain. But here you're Margaret. This whole interesting person with opinions and talents I never knew about. Her insight struck me deeply. That's very perceptive, Emma. Is that why you bought this place? To be Margaret instead of just Grandma? Partly, I acknowledged. Though the two aren't mutually exclusive. Being your grandmother is one of my greatest joys. I just needed space to be all the other parts of myself too. Later, as we sat by the fire with mugs of cocoa, Emma asked tentatively, "Do you think they'll go back to how they were before? Once Christmas is over?" I considered her question carefully. Old patterns are strong. I suspect there will be backsliding and moments of forgetfulness. But I've changed the fundamental equation by establishing clear boundaries. The baseline has shifted. And this cabin makes it real, she observed, looking around the space that so clearly expressed my independent identity. They can't pretend you're just sitting around waiting for their attention anymore. Exactly, I smiled, impressed by her understanding. This cabin is both sanctuary and statement. I want to visit you here, she said suddenly. Not just with my parents or for holidays. Just to spend time with you. Would that be okay? More than okay, I assured her, deeply moved. This home was meant for living fully, not in isolation. As we prepared for bed, Emma paused at her bedroom door. This has been the best Christmas I can remember, she said thoughtfully. Not because of presents, but because it felt real. Real is a good word for it, I agreed. Authentic might be another. After she'd gone to her room, I stood at the great windows, watching snow begin to fall softly over the mountains. The cabin around me, my cabin chosen for my pleasure alone, felt different tonight. No longer just a statement of independence or a refuge from exclusion, but the beginning of something new. A place where authentic family connections might finally have room to grow. Spring came to the mountains with gentle insistence. Melting snow drifts into babbling streams and coaxing pale green buds from dormant branches. I'd been in my mountain cabin for nearly 4 months now, watching the seasons transform the landscape from white to vibrant awakening. Much like the land around me, my relationship with my children had undergone its own thaw. gradual, sometimes halting but undeniably progressing. The changes hadn't happened overnight. January brought tentative phone calls, careful in tone and timing. February saw my first genuine invitations to their homes, real invitations with reasonable notice, not last-minute obligations. March introduced a new pattern of Sunday video calls with the grandchildren, scheduled weekly rather than sporadic when guilt prompted connection. Small changes that together represented significant shifts. On this particular April morning, I stood on my deck with coffee, surveying the property I'd come to love deeply. The mountain air carried the scent of pine and new growth, invigorating and peaceful at once. My phone chimed with a text from Emma, who had become my most consistent correspondent since Christmas. Finished my college application essay. Can I email it for feedback? It's about finding your voice later in life. Inspired by someone I know. I smiled, typing back my enthusiastic agreement. Emma's transformation over recent months had been particularly rewarding to witness. From somewhat self-absorbed teenager to thoughtful young woman developing her own values, often distinct from her parents' materialistic priorities. The sound of tires on gravel drew my attention to the driveway, where Ben's truck appeared around the bend. Since Christmas, our friendship had deepened into something neither of us had anticipated. A companionship that brought richness to both our lives. Not quite romance, though perhaps edging in that direction with patient deliberation. We were both cautious people who valued clarity and intention in relationships. "Morning," he called, emerging from the vehicle with a bakery box in one hand and gardening tools in the other. Ready to tackle those raised beds we talked about? We had planned a vegetable garden for the sunny south side of the property. My first attempt at growing food rather than just flowers. Ben, with his practical knowledge of mountain growing conditions, had offered to help design and build the beds. "Absolutely," I replied, meeting him at the bottom of the deck stairs. "Though I'm not sure I've fully convinced myself I have any talent for gardening." "Talent is overrated," he said, handing me the bakery box. "Persistence matters more. Plants respond to consistent attention, not natural ability. Rather like relationships," I observed, accepting the pastries with a grateful smile. "Exactly like relationships," he agreed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. We spent the morning measuring and building the cedar frames that would hold my first gardening endeavor. The physical work was satisfying in ways my previous life had rarely offered. Creating something tangible, useful, and potentially nourishing. "Your son called me yesterday," Ben mentioned casually as we broke for lunch on the deck. Paused surprised. "Brian, whatever for?" "That he should talk to you directly about your availability," Ben replied with a slight smile. "Not assume I keep your calendar." Wise answer. "He's trying, Margaret. They all are in their ways." I nodded thoughtfully. "They are. Imperfectly, inconsistently, but genuinely trying. It's more than I expected, honestly." "You changed the equation," Ben observed. "Made them see you as a complete person with agency and boundaries, not just a convenient mom figure to be accessed when needed and ignored when not." Before I could respond, my phone rang. Brian's name appearing on the screen, as if our conversation had summoned him. "Mom," he greeted me when I answered. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all. Ben and I are just having lunch after building some garden beds." Brief pause. "That's actually why I'm calling. Jennifer and I were wondering if we could bring the kids up this weekend. Tommy's been asking about your mountain cabin for weeks, and we thought a proper visit might be nice." The careful phrasing, a request rather than an announcement, wasn't lost on me. "That would be lovely, Brian. When were you thinking of arriving?" "Saturday morning, if that works for you. We'd get a room at that inn in town, of course." Another meaningful difference from Christmas. No presumption they would stay in my cabin without explicit invitation. "The inn is lovely, but you're welcome to use the guest rooms if you prefer," I offered, finding I genuinely meant it. "Just let me know so I can prepare accordingly." After finalizing the details and ending the call, I looked up to find Ben watching me with quiet approval. That sounded promisingly respectful, he observed. It was, I agreed. Though I'm still adjusting to this new version of Brian who actually asks rather than announces. Do you trust it will last? I considered the question carefully. I trust that the dynamic has fundamentally changed. Whether every interaction will reflect that change perfectly, that's another matter. Old habits resurface sometimes. But the baseline has shifted because I shifted first. You stopped accepting the role they'd assigned you, he pointed out. Later that afternoon, as Ben was leaving, Harold called to check in. Our weekly conversation that had continued faithfully since Christmas. I brought him up to date on the garden project and Brian's upcoming visit. Sounds like progress continues, he noted approvingly. How are you feeling about all of it? I glanced around at my cabin, so thoroughly mine in every detail, from the art on the walls to the garden beds taking shape outside. Content, I replied truthfully. Not because everything is perfect with my children, but because my happiness no longer depends on their approval or inclusion. That's the real victory, Harold observed. Independence of spirit, not just living situation. That evening, as twilight settled over the mountains, I walked the perimeter of my property, mentally mapping where I might plant flowering shrubs to attract butterflies, where a bench might offer the perfect spot for morning meditation, where wind chimes would catch the afternoon breezes. Small additions to make this place even more distinctly mine. My phone chimed with an email from Emma. Her college essay attached with a nervous message asking for my honest opinion. I settled into my favorite chair by the window to read it, touched that she valued my perspective so highly. The essay was beautifully written, exploring how witnessing my transformation had inspired her own reconsideration of priorities and authentic self-expression. She wrote of Christmas Eve, the night she'd stayed behind when the others went to the inn, as a turning point in her understanding of what it meant to live intentionally rather than according to others' expectations. In watching my grandmother reclaim her identity beyond the roles assigned to her, she wrote, I began to question which parts of my own identity were authentic and which were performances designed to secure approval. Her courage in establishing boundaries, even when painful, showed me that genuine relationships must be built on mutual respect rather than obligation or convenience. Tears welled unexpectedly as I read her words. Of all the outcomes I'd imagined when I purchased this mountain sanctuary, peace, independence, self-discovery, I never anticipated becoming a model of empowerment for my teenage granddaughter. The realization crystallized something I'd been feeling increasingly over recent months. This cabin, initially acquired as a reaction to exclusion, a statement of independence born from hurt, had evolved into something far more positive. Not a retreat from painful relationships, but a foundation for authentic ones. Not an ending but a beginning. I composed a thoughtful response to Emma, praising both her writing skills and her insights, then stepped onto the deck to watch the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The mountain air carried the scent of earth awakening, of possibilities unfolding. 4 months ago, I'd stood in this same spot nursing wounds of exclusion and steeling myself for confrontation. Now I stood in quiet anticipation of Saturday's family visit. Not desperate for their approval, not anxious about their judgment, but genuinely looking forward to continuing our collective journey toward more honest connection. The mountain cabin had served its purpose, not as the dramatic statement of independence I'd initially imagined, but as the solid foundation for a life rebuilt on my own terms. A life with room for family, for friendship, for growth, for discovery. A life where being forgotten for Christmas had led through unexpected pathways to being truly seen for the first time in years. I smiled up at the emerging stars, feeling both grounded and free. Like the mountains themselves, standing firm while reaching skyward. The next morning brought a surprise visit from Lisa. Not with her whole family but alone. She stood at my door looking uncertain, holding a small potted orchid. I hope I'm not intruding, she said hesitantly. I was in town and I thought maybe we could talk. Just us. I invited her in, made tea, and we sat at the kitchen island where so much had already transpired. "I've been thinking a lot since Christmas," she began, turning her teacup in her hands. "About everything you said. About how we treated you. And," I prompted gently, "and you were right. About all of it." She looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed. "I was so angry at Dad for dying. For leaving us. For leaving me. And somehow that anger transferred to you. Like if I kept my distance, I wouldn't have to feel the loss so sharply." "I understand that, Lisa. Grief makes us do strange things. But it wasn't fair to you. You lost your husband. We pushed you away when you needed us most." She wiped at her eyes. "Emma's been challenging me on everything lately. Asking hard questions. She says if she can see you clearly, why couldn't I?" "Emma is wise beyond her years," I said softly. "She gets that from you," Lisa said with a watery smile. "The version of you I'd forgotten existed." We talked for 2 hours that morning. Really talked. Not about logistics or surface pleasantries, but about grief, regret, forgiveness, and hope. When she finally left, we hugged at the door. A real embrace, not the perfunctory kind we'd exchanged for years. Watching her car disappear down the mountain road, I realized that this was what the cabin had truly given me. Not isolation or revenge or even just independence, but the space to become whole again. And in becoming whole, to show my family what authentic connection could look like. The mountains stood eternal around me, witnesses to endings and beginnings, to winters survived and springs embraced. And I stood among them, no longer forgotten, but finally truly seen.